welcome you to our webinar program. My name is A, and I'm the IT specialist at SEAMEO RETRAC, Vietnam. SEAMEO RETRAC is one of the SEAMEO centers in the region. SEAMEO RETRAC hosts the webinar since 2018 in collaboration with its sister center, SEAMEO Simulek, Indonesia. We are now in our webinar series 2021. This is our sixth lecture in our webinar since 2021. Our topic for today is differentiated instruction. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Our webinar is video recorded. Please watch and listen to the video. The video takes less than 30 minutes. So for your comments and questions while the video is played or after watching the video, please type them in the control panel. I'll bring them up to our lecture. The video is followed with the questions and answer portion. Please note that the participants will receive the webinar certificates free of charge by completing the assignment 1 week after the webinar session. The guideline of the assignment is posted in the eTraining Simulek website. Now, without further ado, I will introduce you to our lecturer. Our lecturer is Dr. Anita C. Oblina. Dr. Oblina obtained a doctorate degree in educational planning and management in the Philippines. She was the assistant to the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Xavier University, Philippines in 2014. The Dean of Faculty and Academic Affairs at Fimar Cagayan de Oro College from 2015 to 2017, Philippines. And she holds the post as a Senior Educational Specialist at SEAMEO RETRAC for a number of years now. She has been working as a curriculum developer, instructional material designer, trainer, researcher, and lecturer. She is very passionate to advance the leadership and the management skills of the teachers, school leaders, administrators, and school officials in Southeast Asia region, required in the rapid and dynamic changes of the learning environment in Asia and beyond. May I now give the floor to Dr. Oblina.
To watch the video, and then looking forward to our sharing of insights, ideas, and thoughts about differentiated instruction, as well as questions that you would like to explore. And then we will try to find answers to those questions. So with that in mind, we are now going to watch the video. Hi everyone, welcome to topic 6 of our webinar series 2021. Topic 6 is differentiated instruction. My presentation includes 3 key points as follows. What is differentiated instruction? How can teachers differentiate instruction and apply in the class? And what are the challenges and benefits of differentiated instruction? What is differentiated instruction? Carol Ann Tomlinson, an author and teacher regarded as a pioneer in differentiated instruction, describes it as tailoring instruction to meet individual needs.
Except we will check first. Sorry about the inconvenience.
Yes, sir, no problem.
Hi everyone, welcome to topic 6 of our webinar series 2021. Topic 6 is
Same handy. Also.
Hi everyone, welcome to topic 6 of our webinar series 20.
Okay, please wait. We still uploading the video to the application because we have problem with the master file.
Hi everyone, welcome to topic 6 of our webinar series 2021. Topic 6 is differentiated instruction. My presentation includes 3 key points as follows. What is differentiated instruction? How can teachers differentiate instruction and apply in the class? And what are the challenges and benefits of differentiated instruction? What is differentiated instruction? Carol Ann Tomlinson, an author and teacher regarded as a pioneer in differentiated instruction, describes it as tailoring instruction to meet individual needs, which suggests that we teach with an eye on the student. It means giving each student the opportunity to learn in a way that suits his/her readiness level, interest, needs, and learning preferences. The goal is to make sure that all students master key concepts while striking a balance between comfortability and challenge for the high-achieving students and the low-performing students. Differentiated instruction is not the same as individualized instruction. While individualized instruction involves personalizing and customizing courses of study for every student, differentiated instruction adapts the curriculum to respond to each student's unique learning challenges. It is important to note that differentiated instruction does not mean that a separate lesson plan is developed for every single student. Instead, students are presented with several learning options or different paths to learning in order to help them take in and make sense of the information. For example, think about a computer class. If you're using differentiated instruction, you would not worry to wait for Julie and Bob to catch up the lesson. The advanced users in your class are provided with more advanced material so that they could enhance their skills. Likewise, Julie and other beginners are provided with less advanced material to help them gain a solid understanding of using the computer before moving on to the presentation software. In differentiated classes, Students and teachers are collaborators in learning. Teachers understand the need to help students, and students take increasing responsibility for their own learning growth. Having covered the fundamentals of differentiated instruction, let me go on to my second key point. How can teachers differentiate instruction and apply in the class? Think 7 to differentiate instruction by addressing students' readiness, interest, learning profile. Then teachers can differentiate the content, process, product, and learning environment. Based on students' readiness, how students perform in your class, such as their reading ability, pace of learning, dependence on the teacher or independence, level of competency, interest. What does the student enjoy? Learning profile. What learning preference does student have? Auditory, visual, kinesthetic. What about the learning styles? I would like to recall with you the 7 learning styles are as follows. Visual learning style. Students prefer information to be presented in graphs and pictures. Auditory learning style. Students learn by listening. Kinesthetic learning style. Students learn best through movement and hands-on activities. Verbal learning style. Students work well with written information or spoken word. Logical learning style. Students think mathematically and systematically and use reasoning. Interpersonal learning style. Students work best in groups and through collaboration. And intrapersonal learning style. Students prefer to tackle tasks on their own and reflect often. Having said, teachers can differentiate the content, process, product, and learning environment. Content. Content refers to knowledge, skills, and attitudes we want children to learn. Differentiated content refers to what students learn. This can mean different topics that appeal to students' individual interests, or it can mean different levels that suit students' academic readiness. How to differentiate the content. Scale and scaffold difficulty levels. Let students choose the projects based on their interest and target assignments for individual skill gaps. How to apply in the class. Change in the material being learned by a student. Example, objective, label 5 major parts of a cell. Student A learns to label 5 major parts, while student B learns to label more parts and define the functions of each part. Student A's readiness is beginner, while student B's readiness is advanced. Process. Process refers to varying learning activities or strategies to provide appropriate methods for students to explore the concepts. Differentiated process refers to how students learn. Differentiated classrooms offer a variety of formats in which students can choose to access information, not just one channel, such as a textbook. How to differentiate the process. Assign more difficult activities to challenge high-achieving students. Provide various options for how students approach the activity, whether it be individually or working in groups. Include a variety of information formats, reading, video, audio, and hands-on, and mix up group sizes. How to apply in the class. Change in the way students access materials. Example, student A may access information through a learning center, while student B may access information through a website. Student A prefers to use hard copy, while student B prefers to use online. For visual and word learners, provide textbooks and print materials. For auditory learners, allow them to listen to audiobooks. And for kinesthetic learners, give the opportunity to complete an interactive assignment online. Product. Product refers to varying the complexity of the product that students create to demonstrate mastery of the concepts. Differentiated product refers to how students demonstrate knowledge. Teacher who practices differentiation gives students multiple ways to show they understand the material rather than simply giving everyone the same multiple choice test at the end of a unit. How to differentiate product. Encourage students to pursue their own projects based on their interest. For example, let students decide what topic they would like to research for their research project. Give students different options of how to demonstrate understanding. For example, write an essay, deliver an oral presentation, create a poster, and others. And assess students' work in a manner that matches their skills level. For example, create different rubrics to match a student's level. How to apply in the class. Change in the way students show what they have learned. Example, objective, demonstrate students' understanding of the food chain. Student A may create a three-dimensional diagram, while student B may design PowerPoint presentation. For read and write learners, write a book report. For visual learners, create a graphic organizer of the story. For auditory learners, give an oral report. And for kinesthetic learners, build a diorama illustrating the story. And learning environment. Learning environment refers to the diverse physical locations, contexts, and cultures in which students learn. Differentiated learning environment refers to a wide variety of settings, such as outside of the school locations and outdoor environments, including how students interact with and treat one another, as well as the ways in which teachers may organize an educational setting to facilitate learning. How to differentiate learning environment. The learning environment should be flexible to allow for student mobility, be learner-centered to encourage independence, and be open to involve varied groupings. How to apply in the class. Group students by interest, ability, and learning style. Grouping by interest creates more variety in the class and gets students engaged with their work. Grouping by ability is an effective strategy to help students learn at a comfortable pace. And grouping by learning style helps students learn concepts and demonstrate their understanding through means that they are most comfortable with. Having presented the ways of differentiating instruction, allow me to go on to the last key point of my presentation. What are the challenges and benefits of differentiated instruction? Some challenges of differentiated instruction are lack of time. Schools struggle to implement differentiation because teachers who already work an average of 53 hours per week simply don't have enough hours in the day to develop differentiated lesson plans for their students. Limited resources. Aside from not having enough time to make differentiation realistic, many teachers also struggle to find the resources to differentiate effectively. They find it frustrating to try to track down different articles that contain the same information at different reading levels, media in different formats for each lesson, and resources for multiple activities. They need sound literature paper or maybe video on how to apply differentiated instruction in teaching. Specifically, more examples from the local area which could be hardly found. Management issues. Lack of support from management. Teachers are left out on their own. Lack of training both in learning strategies and classroom management. Teachers should be given more mentoring and more exemplars on the application of differentiated instruction in their discipline. No role modeling that results to lack of confidence in using differentiated instruction. And nation or statewide emphasis on content mastery for state assessments. Teachers are preoccupied of content mastery rather than the process due to nation or state assessments. And some benefits of differentiated instruction include all students are working at an appropriate challenge level. Students who are above grade level don't get bored and disengaged with skills they have already mastered. They can keep learning in new and more challenging materials. The sky is the limit. Teachers determine when it's time for a student to move up to the next level and present him or her the right challenge. Students who are below grade level don't simply fall further behind. Instead, they can keep learning and growing at their own pace. Teachers can tell at a glance how each student is performing in each skill and quickly assess when intervention is needed. Students who are at grade level still get individualized lessons, not simply a one-size-fits textbook. Since teachers don't have to spend all of their time focusing on students above or below grade level, the students in the middle can benefit from more instruction time with the teacher. Everyone is able to participate in activities. Differentiated instruction allows all students to participate in and contribute to classroom activities. No students are left out of learning opportunities simply because the reading assignments was above their level skill. Placing students into mixed level groups for small group projects provides the perfect scenario for peer-to-peer coaching. Students at higher levels can share knowledge and tips with students who need extra help. However, since every student completed all reading assignments at their own level, higher level students don't have to do all of the work for the other students in the group. Everyone can contribute. Group activities and discussion not only help students to learn the material in a new way, but they also teach students to collaborate and build each other up, not just strive for their own high grades. And students learn to value individual interests and abilities. In a differentiated learning environment, students have an opportunity to explore topics that interest them. Everyone gets to choose a topic that makes him, her excited about learning. Students can learn and demonstrate knowledge in different ways. There are opportunities to learn and practice alone or in groups by reading, by watching videos, by completing projects, and more. Students all learn differently, and the teacher ensures that every student has an opportunity to learn in a way that works for him or for her. Differentiation teaches students that there isn't just one right way to learn. Everyone is different, and everyone has different strengths. Thus, instead of seeing others as simply good in school or bad in school, students can see the value of their peers' individual interests and strengths. I have just presented what I have in mind to share with you about differentiated instruction. I would like to wrap off my presentation with a few thoughts. The match is the key in differentiated instruction. A teacher who differentiates effectively matches the content, the level of the thinking process, the choice of the product, the choice of the learning environment, and the choice of the assessment to each student or cluster of students. The result is the learning experience of each student or cluster of students. If you find differentiated instruction beneficial to your students, then you and your school will look for innovative solutions to the existing challenges and promote differentiated instruction. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, we have just watched the video. And now I'll pass on the microphone to Mr. E for our question and answer.
Thank you, Ms. Anita. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions in the control panel. It looks like we do not have any questions for today's webinar. So, Dr. Oblina, is there anything else you could want to cover before we wrap up?
Okay, well, yeah, I understand. It seems that the participants maybe are still formulating their questions, and maybe they are still thinking, what to ask, or maybe what to share about differentiated instruction, which I believe they are using in their own, schools, in their own context, and in their own circumstance. But then, yeah, while waiting for the questions to come, I would like to emphasize here that differentiated instruction is not individualized instruction or personalized instruction in that sense. Not really well, maybe personalized, but not individualized instruction. Because I believe that teachers cannot afford to use individualized instruction of having like 40 students or 50 students or more number of students in the class. That's quite, impossible to do. Maybe we can have individualized instruction if we only have like maybe 10 or 15 or 20 students. But if more than students, we could not. However, we can use differentiated instruction. As already, presented in the video, by differentiated instruction, we can use grouping. That's the process. We can use grouping. We can group students according to their level of competency, according to their interests, and according to their learning styles. So, but then before doing that, we should know our students. So knowing our students really is a very critical, foundation to use differentiated instruction. Unless we know our students, we'll be able to differentiate our instruction depending on their needs, like their level of interest, level of competency, their interest, and then their learning profiles. By then, we can differentiate the content, we can differentiate the process, we can differentiate the product and the learning environment. Okay, so I hope I have given you kind of insights, and I understand that you are in your own ways, you are practicing differentiated instruction, and I hope those who are not yet doing it to try, for the sake of the students and to be able to maximize the learning process of the students. Okay, so by this time, do we already have a question?
Yeah, there are some questions for you, Miss Oblina. Thank you for your sharing. There's a questions from Ewina. It is, what are some tips in how to begin practicing differentiated instruction for new teachers?
Oh, very interesting question. Okay, now as I mentioned just minute ago, the first tip, the first thing that teacher, especially the beginner teacher, should do is know your students. What do you mean by know your students? Know the level of competency of your students, where they are at and their learning competency. Are they slow learners or average learners, or I would say high achieving learners or high achieving students? Know that. That's the first thing that we should know. We should do. Now, point is, how do I know their level of competency? Well, you can use a pre-test or a diagnostic test to do that. Okay? The pre-test will tell you where the level of competency your student is or your students are. Okay? And then with the competency, you can already include, with the pre-assessment, you can already include the competency, the content. You can also include the learning preferences, their learning styles, like are the kinesthetic learners, or are the visual learners, or are the auditory learners, and other. I have given you like the 7 learning styles, the multiple intelligence. So you can include that in your pre-test, and then you can also include the interest of your students. What do they like most? It's a kind of a research at the same time. It's a quality research, actually. That's the pre-assessment. And then there you will start, looking at and then grouping them and then like, okay, these are uh, below level of competency to, I am teaching math, for example. So these are the students. And then, grouping the average and the high achiever. Then with that, you can plan, you can adjust your content, you can, I would say, be flexible, you can differentiate the content, okay? And then you can differentiate the product, what you would like them to perform at the end of the lesson, depending on their level of competency. And then the process as well, you can differentiate the process based on their learning profile, whether they are visuals or they are auditory, and all. And that's the basic thing that you're going to do. Okay. um then the next thing is to prepare. This is it. Now you have to prepare your materials, and it will take time. But really, if you would like to really maximize the learning process of your students, you really would like your students to learn to that extent, the greatest extent possible, then you can take time. You can take time. So these are some preparatory things to do to start using differentiated instruction. I hope I have shared with you my thoughts, and maybe you still would like to follow up my answer. Please do so.
Thank you, Dr. Alita. There is another question for you
Mhm.
from Acha Rosia. Can you share a lesson with one full hour example? Can you share a lesson with one full, maybe 1 hour lesson with differentiated lesson?
You mean what for? Good for 4 hours?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
it's
one
a
top.
1 hour lesson
It's
is
really a
is
one lesson plan.
yeah, I think so. I think that's what he means.
Ah, really? That's so. I would say quite long. I think that's kind of a demonstration. You have to demonstrate on how to apply differentiated instruction, I guess, because that's one package of lesson plan. Mhm. So it's a demonstration. Mm. It depends now of like what subject you are teaching. Are you teaching like English or math or social studies, biology? Mm. Now, as teachers, we know the process of teaching. Like we have this introduction, beginning, and then we have the presentation of our lesson. And then there, of course, in the introduction of our lesson, in the motivation process, you get to engage your students. You have to explain what is your lesson about? What is the objective of your lesson? What do you like to accomplish at the end of the session? That's quite important. What do we accomplish at the end of this, for example, English literature class? I just, and so then there, explain to your students that you are using this is the method, this is the approach that you are using. uh, let them be ready, because in the differentiated instruction you cannot help but to group your students. You group your students according to their level of competency, and then along with that, uh, based on their interests and their learning profile. So it's not just a one-way class. Like you teach one class there and you are in front of them and you are giving them one content and one strategy, one process, and one product. It's not that way when you use differentiated instruction. It's really it's so dynamic, dynamic in the sense that students are interacting, you know, and then you are going to see to it that all students are involved in the process. You don't just stay on your desk, on your chair, but you have to move and to go around and see what they are doing. That's it's a kind, it's not as, I would say it's not really that very silent class, because we allow our students here to talk and to manifest their learning and to perform, to do something, and it's a lively class. But you see, there's a lot of preparation on the part of the teacher, that if you really would like your students to learn at the maximum level, you've got to prepare, but it pays off when you see students are interacting and learning the way you would like them to be. Okay? So that's how in terms of example, really, I'm sorry, but I could not. That would depend on the subject that you are teaching. But I am just kind of sharing with you the kind of class, the classroom that you have. It's not the traditional classroom that only the teacher is speaking. Students are really doing something. So teacher now is facilitating. Teacher is moving around and seeing and helping, students who find difficulty. It's a group work kind of. And towards the end, you're going to make a conclusion, a summary, like concluding part of your activity of your lesson, and then find out whether or not the objective of your session, of your class, has been achieved. And maybe next time either you can improve, there's always room for improvement, really, and make the students enjoy and engage, in the process. And I guess that would be the time then that students are more learning, and the learning of the students would retain. There is a retention of the learning, because it's the student, the students are working. You know. It's different from merely listening from the teacher. Students will forget what we are saying, but students won't forget when they do something, and that is differentiated instruction. Okay, I hope I have given you an overview of how does that look like, to have a differentiated instruction in our classroom. Mhm.
Thank you for your answer, Ms. Oblina. Participants, do you have any other questions for our presentation for Dr. Oblina? There is another question from Simolek from Miss Ansi Romat Hosier.
Mhm.
I'm sorry if I spelled the name wrong. Can we really apply differentiated instruction in the class? I have 30 students with many different ability, but not much time, and there are some curriculum demands. Also, during the pandemic, the learner getting slower, but learning is going so fast. Are these differentiated instruction just to small size class?
Okay, thank you. Um, I would say that differentiated instruction can be applied in a larger class, in a big class. Back to the Philippines, when I was still in the university, I applied differentiated instruction in my class, and it's quite big class. Like I have 50 students by that time, and we were able to do it. But the only requirement of a differentiated instruction to really make it, successful in some sense, is that there must be enough space, because students, you need to group your students. If you will do it in the classroom and the class size is small, that might be hampering, the the activities that the teacher plans. But as I mentioned in my video, learning environment may also happen outside the classroom. Now, this is now if we are going to have maybe a face-to-face classes, but in the online classes, I guess we could not do that. No, but that would depend on the creativity and resourcefulness of the teacher. But you see, we can bring students outside in the field or wherever you feel that, or in the theater or in the gym, wherever you feel there's more space. Okay, and then there you can conduct your class. Maybe in the different, if the really the space, the classroom space or size is not enough, perhaps there are lessons that you really would like to be done by using differentiated instruction. So you can invite your students to transfer to location where you feel it has enough space, and you can do that. But certainly you can apply, you can use differentiated instruction in big classes. Why? Because you are going to group your students, as I already mentioned earlier, by their level of competency, their readiness, and then their interests and their learning profiles or learning styles. But you need a space if you do that. It will look very awkward if the space is so tight, I guess. That could not be. But you can, that would also depend on the kind of lesson that you have. Maybe the topic or the lesson that you have really don't need much movements, but only to just group them and share their thoughts and do something. And you can still do it that way. The point here is that you visualize, you imagine your class. If you apply differentiated instruction, you visualize your students in one class, and you see what you would like them to do and what you would like to happen during the learning activity period. Then there you can plan. So it's really planning that matters a lot, and then matching, that you match your content, your process, and your product and your learning environment to the needs of your students. So yes, I don't know if I've answered your question. The basic question is that, can it be applied in bigger classes? And I would say yes. Okay, now before I forget, now since we are still now in the online teaching, question is, can we apply that in the online teaching? Yes, you can have breakout rooms. You can group your students. You can still do that, but again, you have to plan it out. Plan it out. Because students are more engaged if you will allow them to learn by their own with your guidance and with your tips on how to do it. Yes.
Thank you, Miss Anita. There's another question for you from Marjorie Yanuru. How to make different rubric as displayed in the video.
Oh, rubrics.
Yes.
The question is how to make different rubrics.
Yes.
Okay. Now we know rubrics. When we speak of rubrics, we are making a criteria. Okay. So, for example, you are going to make a rubric of group discussion. Okay. And then you have to identify what do you want to, what do you see, not what do you want to grade, but what skills would you like students to develop in a group discussion? What knowledge and skills, for example, you would like students to develop or to enhance in the group discussion? Okay. Maybe one important thing in the group discussion is content, right? We would like our students to know the content so that they can discuss, like to what extent they know about what is communication, like what communication is, for example. So if the topic is about communication, so how far they understand what communication is. So content. Now in the rubric you identified one, I would say one domain, like content. Okay. And then the next is participation. You would like each group to participate. So are they skillful in participating group discussion? Participation. And then maybe is another one is you might also really check on their level of communication skills, because when we speak of participation here, we are looking into how interested are they to join in the in the discussion. Are they passive or active members of the group? That can be under participation. Maybe another one is their speaking skills. So you would also like to consider the speaking skills of the students. So that could be another one, because that can also be an area to be, to be improved. So speaking skills, maybe 3, or you can add more, whatever is that you'd like to have in your rubrics, and perhaps you would see the highest is 10. Okay, if the highest is 10, then how much would you give to the content? If you feel content has greater strength, then you can put higher, what is that number for content. So maybe you can have it like maybe 4, depend, or maybe 5. So if it's 4, and then you have, if that would 10, okay, 4, and then participation 3, and then speaking skills 3, so you have 10 or something. That's just an example. Just an example. And so you have a total of 10. Now, think of this. If you use content or speaking skills, participation content as your domains in your rubrics, at the back of your head, in choosing these 3 among other possible, criteria, is at the back of your head is that you can improve this. This is now your kind of indicators where you can put in and improve the knowledge of the students in terms of the content, the participation of the students, improve the participation of the students, improve the speaking skills of the students. Okay, so that's what rubric is. When we speak of rubric, teacher has in mind that we can improve our students based on this. These are our indicators. We know where they are, we know their strength, and we know their limitation. Okay, so we can help improve their weaknesses and maybe straighten up their strength as well. Okay, I hope I have shared with you about, right, this is an example of rubrics, but you can adjust the rubrics depending on, by adjusting the rubrics, the domains, the criteria, depending on what is it that you'd like to measure. As well as you can adjust the number of points. That will depend on the teacher. The point is the teacher knows what she is doing. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. There's another question for you from Marif Aquino. Are you going to evaluate the assessment online, and will it be valid?
Okay. That's quite challenging, no? Online. Assessment online, because we know students can cheat easily online. And say, how do we know that this is authentic? I mean, really, students are answering and doing this. Okay, really, it's really a big problem. I know universities, colleges, and secondary schools, primary schools are really having this problem of authentic assessment online. That's a big issue, especially during pandemic, because all learning, teaching is done online. remote teaching. Really, it's quite difficult. But if you ask me about the validity of online assessment, I would say I can only say that the assessment is valid when the assessment is performed by the student online. Like, for example, I can ask my student to role play. I can ask my student to perform an experiment. I can ask my student to demonstrate what they have learned about the parts of the body, whatever is that. So I would be quite comfortable that it's an authentic assessment. However, when we look at it from the point of view of the state, or the school wherein we need really a standardized test, I would say. By standardized test, it's like pen and paper, like multiple choice or writing essays, and um, I cannot tell whether it's authentic, but there are apps now, educational apps, you know. Uh, Forgot that one, Neoms or something. I forgot that app, which I know that could detect whether the students' answer are really authentic, that this is really real. Hopefully, really, but that's it. That's what I can share. Accordingly, there are apps who can test whether the students really are doing the test or not. Mhm.
Thank you, Doctor. There's
Mhm.
another question from Ziski Alaf. Do we need to create a different assessment based on their skills?
By I hope you mean rubrics, using the rubrics maybe, assessing the skills of the students. Yes, we can. Yeah, we can. Um, Now, speaking also that, yeah, this reminds me. Speaking also of doing rubrics, or creating rubrics, it is really good if you will allow your students to get involved in the process of making the rubrics. As the students, involve the students. No matter how, like, okay, maybe they're graders and they don't know, but you can ask them, you know, what they would like to look into, you can explain it, engaging students to create rubrics really matter a lot. Research says that it means a lot. Why? Because if we engage and involve our students to create rubrics, there is that sense of ownership on the part of the students. There is that ownership that I am part of these rubrics and I know what is expected of me. You know, than giving the test and the students don't know how they will be graded. That's quite unfair. Really very unfair on the part of the students. That was the traditional one. I know during when I was a kid, really, when I was a student, no, the teachers will just give the test and we don't know, we don't know what they're testing of us. We were caught unprepared. Realize that's really unfair, really very unfair. In the student-centered learning, student is the focus. Let the students know how they are graded and how many points are given out in the particular domain, in the rubrics, for example, in the particular criterion. Involve the students. And then there, you know what are their preferences. And, by being involving the students or engaging the students in creating rubrics, does not mean that you lose your identity as a teacher. You can guide them. You can explain to them further. You know, you can enhance their understanding of the rubrics. But yeah, true. You can create different assessments, different depending on the levels of the students. Of course, your assessment is not the same to your assessment to the high performing student. Your assessment for a low performing student should be different from the high achieving student. That's quite unfair if you give the same assessment, because the low performing student could not reach to the high achieving student, and the high achieving student could not understand. You cannot pull them down as well. They have their own needs, and we cannot blame students for that. That's a gift. Yeah. So you're right. We have to prepare different assessments to different levels of competency of our students.
Thank you, Doctor. There's another question. In my class, I have 16 students with three types of learning abilities. Average students from 14 years, one slow learner, and one special need, speech delay. So she asked that what suggestion can you give based on your experience?
Mm. Okay, that's really quite challenging because your class is big. It's a big class, right? It's 50 students. Am I right? With different competency levels and learning needs. Now, question is, how do I apply differentiated instruction? Now, speaking of differentiated instruction here. Um, hmm. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to group your students. You can only do that by grouping your students so that it will not be unfair for those average students to be grouped to the, you know, low performing students. Now, this is it now. I am not telling you that you group them right at the beginning of the class. It should not be that way. You will only group them during the learning activities. But during the entire class, you speak to them as one class. You know, we don't we don't I would say we don't classify them because that might also be unfair to students. No, that's unfair. If you right at the beginning of the class you already group them, it should not be that way. You meet them as a whole class, respect them as one class, one level. If it is like grade 12, okay, all as one grade 12. You only change your groupings, your the arrangement of the class during the learning activity, because the high achieving student will get bored if you do the same like activity to the whole class, and the low performing student could not also do as expected. That's why we said one size does not fit all. It should not be like that way. I'll say, okay, so then it's during the learning, during the process, that you have to adjust the content of their activity and how they are going to perform and the product, their output. That would depend. Um, Back to the question, you can use differentiated instruction again, as I said, by grouping them during the process, the learning activities. And then the point here is that you have also one special kid, speech delayed, as I understand, that needs really a very special learning material, different learning material uh, in the activity process, so that the student will also be able to at least move a little. Of course, we could not compare that kid to other kids, but we should also give attention and do what we can in order to help out, and there is movement of learning on the part of the student. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Is there anything, is there any questions for Dr. Arlita? You can type in the control panels and I will bring up to our lecturer. Um, Doctor, there's another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's difficult to make a different material process and others at the same time when we should apply to the students. So how can we handle it? As we know, we are in the pandemic era. We teach online.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the question is, how
Yes,
can we,
handle it.
am I
How
correct
can
now?
we solve the questions? How can
Okay.
we solve the problems? I'm gonna repeat the questions. Okay. Uh, he says that I think it's difficult to make different materials process and others at the same time when we should apply to the students. So how can we handle it?
Okay. So that's the question. How can
Yes,
we handle preparing the materials, process, and so on, since it's an online teaching, right?
yes,
Now, I think, um, be it online or face-to-face teaching, we prepare materials. Um, we plan out and prepare materials for a particular lesson that we are teaching. And in the online teaching, we have different apps, educational apps we can use to help us deliver the lesson, or maybe help us reach out our students in a manner that is also friendly to them. So the question of like difficulty of making materials, preparing materials for our online classes, um, can be solved by, again, as I said earlier, uh, preparing, planning, and then preparing materials. At the same time, we can use materials that are friendly to students. By friendly means students are familiar with, so that students would not find it a bit really difficult, because we think of we think also that our students have other classes. There are like maybe 7 subjects or 8 subjects. I don't know number of subjects they are also studying online. So to be friendly with our students, we have to adjust the materials that we are using in terms of um, difficulty, probably. But again, speaking of difficulty, in differentiated instruction, we are as well differentiating the level of difficulty of the materials to our students, like, so that the easy material for the low performing students and the average will be like not so, maybe average difficulty, and in the high achieving students, and then maybe above average difficulty, or depending, your students well. But as I mentioned earlier, um, whether we are teaching online or face to face, we need to plan and prepare for our materials. That's the same concept that we will be doing when we are teaching online. So there is always solution to the problem. If the problem is the preparation of the materials, I know you can do it. Okay. So I hope I have shared my thoughts with you, and you can follow up the question. I mean the answer if you would like. So I can look at and see your perspective, and maybe we are not saying the same line. Okay. What time are we going to be off?
So it's 2 hours. I think that it's gonna be 12.
Okay. Probably like 11:30.
Okay.
Okay. Or unless there are questions, we can entertain questions.
No more questions. So can we continue?
Are there questions?
No, there are no more questions for you.
Okay, I think we have already covered, right?
Okay. It looks like that we've covered all of our questions. Dr. Oplina, is there anything else you could want to cover before we wrap up?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so really, I am very happy and really I am delighted of the very, very interesting and challenging questions, that you have raised. And thank you so much for your active participation. And I know that there are still others who would like to share and who would like maybe to even tell us about their experiences of uh, differentiated instruction in their own schools. But maybe we don't have that much time, or maybe um, you're still in the process of formulating your thoughts. And I would like really to acknowledge your presence and your participation of our webinar today. And hopefully we will be meeting to our next webinars. Thank you so much for your joining us today.
Thank you. Participants, you are invited to our next webinar in January 2022. The details will be announced through our sister center, Simolec. Thanks for participants and the co-host, SEAMEO Simolec. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yi. Thank you, Granita.
Thank you,
See you in the
Agni.
next webinar. Thank you, participant.
Thank you. See you later.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.